The mountain resort looked exactly the way I remembered it: quiet, towering, and unforgiving. Pine trees surrounded the property like silent guards, their shadows stretching long across the cracked stone driveway. The wooden sign at the entrance, once polished and welcoming, now leaned slightly to the left, its letters faded by snowstorms and neglect. Silver Ridge Mountain Resort. I hadn't been back in 7 years. 7 years ago, my wife had passed away in that very lodge after a sudden heart condition no doctor caught in time. After her death, the place stopped being a business. It became a wound. I locked the gates, shut down operations, and walked away, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't breathe there anymore. But time changes things. The letter that pulled me back arrived without warning. A plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sentence typed in bold. Your property is being accessed and altered by the Silver Ridge HOA. I didn't believe it at first. There was no HOA when I left. The resort sat on 60 acres of private mountain land, deeded to my family decades before the nearby residential development even existed. Still, something felt wrong, so I packed my truck, drove 6 hours into the mountains, and returned to the place I once loved and feared. The gate was unlocked. That was the first sign. The second was tire tracks. Fresh. Once I stepped out of the truck slowly, my boots crunching against gravel that hadn't been disturbed in years. Someone had cleared branches. Someone had trimmed bushes. Someone had been here recently. Inside the main lodge, dust coated the furniture, but footprints cut through it like scars. The power was still off, but the breaker panel had been opened. On the wall near the reception desk, someone had posted laminated notices. No trespassing by unauthorized persons. Laughed once sharp and bitter. Unauthorized. On my own land? I was still standing there when I heard voices outside. 2 men in reflective vests were measuring the slope near the old ski lift trail. One of them looked up and froze. "Hey," he called. "You're not supposed to be here." I walked out slowly. "That's funny," I said, "because I own this place." They exchanged looks. One pulled out his phone. "Sir, this property is under HOA management now. If you have an issue, you need to take it up with the board." I felt my jaw tighten. There is no HOA authority over this land. That's not what we were told. Within 10 minutes, the sound of sirens cut through the mountain air. Two sheriff's vehicles rolled up, lights flashing like I was some kind of criminal. A woman stepped out first, mid-40s, clipboard in hand. Smug smile, already loaded. She didn't even look at me before speaking. "This man is trespassing," she told the deputies. "He's been aggressive and interfering with HOA-approved development." I stared at her. "Who are you?" She finally turned. "Linda Crowley, president of the Silver Ridge Homeowners Association." I took a breath. "Linda, you're standing on private property." "Mine," she scoffed. "Sir, this land was abandoned. The HOA assumed control for community safety." The deputy looked at me. "Sir, do you have proof of ownership?" I opened my truck, pulled out a weathered folder, and handed him the deed. His expression changed. Linda's didn't. She leaned closer and whispered, "This won't end well for you." That's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a takeover. The first night back at the resort, I barely slept. Not because of the cold mountain air or the creaking of the old lodge, but because I knew something was wrong at a level far deeper than a simple HOA dispute. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. What I'd walked into was organized, confident, and already in motion. By sunrise, I had proof. I stepped outside with a cup of burnt coffee and froze. Overnight, someone had posted bright orange markers along the gravel road leading into the resort. Wooden stakes hammered deep into the ground, each one stamped with black ink. HOA Community Trail Phase 1. I stood there in disbelief. They hadn't just returned after being warned by the sheriff. They'd escalated. As I followed the markers uphill, I found fresh tire tracks and flattened grass-heavy equipment had been driven across my land while I slept. Near the old overlook, a half-built wooden platform jutted out over the valley, complete with safety rails and a laminated sign describing future community amenities. Community? That word again? By mid-morning, a white SUV pulled up. Linda Crowley stepped out like she owned the mountain, sunglasses on, clipboard tucked under her arm. 2 men followed her HOA security, judging by their matching jackets. "She didn't greet me, sir," she said sharply. "You're interfering with authorized development." I crossed my arms. "You were warned yesterday. This land is private." She smiled thinly. "You abandoned it." "I closed it. I corrected." "There's a difference." Linda stepped closer. "Not under HOA interpretation." That's when she handed me a folded document. A cease and desist notice, stamped with the HOA seal, and dated 3 years back. 3 years you've been trespassing since your return," she said. "If you remain, we'll pursue charges." I left. "You're threatening me on my own land." Her smile vanished. "We're protecting our residents." I watched as her guards began photographing me. That was the moment I understood the game. They weren't trying to scare me off. They were building a paper trail. That afternoon, I drove into town and started pulling public records. What I found made my stomach churn. The Silver Ridge HOA had quietly expanded its jurisdiction map inch by inch over the years. Somehow, My resort land had been shaded gray, labeled as inactive property under community oversight. Inactive.unused.abandoned. Words chosen carefully. At sunset. My phone buzzed. An email. Subject: HOA violation notice number 4417. They accused me of unauthorized occupation, of community development failure to pay HOA dues. HOA dues on land I owned outright. Attached was a bill. $48,600 due immediately. Knew then this wasn't just theft, it was extortion that night. I attended the HOA board meeting. They hadn't expected me to show up. The room was packed with homeowners, families, people who genuinely believed the HOA was protecting their interests. Linda sat at the front. And composed, gavel in hand. When she saw me, her jaw tightened. I'd like to speak, I said. Murmurs rippled through the room. Linda sighed dramatically. We'll allow public comment. I walked forward and placed copies of my land deed on the table. This land, I said clearly, has never been sold, transferred, or abandoned. Yet your HOA is developing it, charging fees, and threatening me. Linda didn't even look down. Our legal counsel has reviewed this matter, she said. Your property was non-operational for over 5 years. The HOA stepped in for safety. I turned to the room. Did any of you know the HOA plans to sell part of the resort land? Silence. Linda snapped. That's confidential. I slid another document forward. Development proposal I'd found filed with the county that morning. It listed trail monitor, platform sponsorships, future land sale projections. Filled the room. One man stood up. You told us this land was donated. Linda's face flushed. Sit down. Another homeowner shouted. You're charging us higher dues for land you don't even own. Linda slammed the gavel. Meeting adjourned. I left knowing 2 things. First, she'd overplayed her hand. Second, she was going to strike back, and she did. By the next morning, county inspectors showed up called by the HOA claiming my presence violated zoning rules. That same day, my truck was ticketed for unauthorized access. HOA security began patrolling the gate. Wanted to exhaust me, pressure me, force me to leave. What they didn't know was that I had already made the CALLSA land use attorney, a zoning expert and someone who specialized in exposing corrupt HOS, Linda thought. She was the predator. She didn't realize she'd just stepped onto land where the truth was buried, and I knew exactly where to dig. By the 5th morning, the mountain felt hostile, not because of the land but because of the people trying to claim it. HOA vehicles were now parked openly near the entrance, as if daring me to challenge them. Orange warning notices flapped against trees. Someone had even changed the sign at the gate, spray painting over the old resort name with the words, Community Access Zone. That was vandalism, but it was also desperation. Linda Crowley was losing control. My attorney arrived just after sunrise, breath fogging in the cold air, carrying a thick black case. We sat at the long dining table inside the lodge, the same table where guests once shared meals now covered in maps, emails, bank records, and recordings. This isn't just an HOA overreach, he said quietly. This is a coordinated fraud operation. He laid out the evidence piece by piece. The HOA had filed abandonment affidavits claiming the resort had been left unmaintained and unused for over 5 years. Those affidavits were signed by board members who had never set foot on the property. Worse, the dates were backdated to create the illusion of legality. Then came the altered maps. Someone had digitally redrawn county zoning boundaries, slowly absorbing my land into HOA territory. It had been done carefully, just enough to avoid immediate scrutiny, too carefully to be accidental. But the most damning evidence came from the finances. HOA funds money collected from homeowners had been used to pay private consultants. Those consultants traced back to shell companies linked to Linda. She wasn't protecting the community, she was stealing from it. That afternoon, Linda struck first. A mass email went out to every homeowner in the development, copied to the county sheriff and zoning office. In it, she painted me as unstable, a man who had returned after years of absence and was resisting lawful authority. She claimed I was aggressive, unpredictable, and a danger to residents. It was a calculated move. If she could discredit me, the facts wouldn't matter. But she made one fatal mistake. She lied publicly, and lies leave trails. By evening, my attorney had drafted formal responses backed with evidence. Screenshots, deed records, audio clips of Linda threatening to make this ugly if I didn't leave. The next morning, sheriff's cruisers arrived again, this time at Linda's request for a trespassing removal. She arrived moments later, confident, clipboard in hand, speaking loudly so everyone could hear. This man has refused multiple lawful orders, she said. We want him removed. One deputy rubbed his forehead. Ma'am, we've been over this, she snapped. Then you were misinformed. That's when another vehicle pulled up and official, the county land commissioner, stepped out. Linda's confidence evaporated. He didn't acknowledge her at first. He shook my hand, then turned toward the property. I've received multiple complaints, he said evenly, including document forgery and unauthorized development. Linda laughed nervously. This is a misunderstanding. The commissioner gestured toward the illegal structures. That platform has no permit, neither does the trail. She opened her mouth, then closed it. He continued walking, reading from his file as homeowners began gathering nearby. This land has never transferred ownership. These abandonment claims are invalid. These maps were altered after submission. Each sentence landed like a hammer. Finally, he stopped and faced Linda, who authorized this construction. She hesitated just a second too long. The board, she said. The commissioner nodded. Then the board is liable. Within an hour, stop work orders were posted across the property. HOA workers were told to leave immediately. Equipment was seized pending investigation. Linda was formally warned for obstruction and misrepresentation. Her face burned with rage. That night, she tried one last move. She filed a police report accusing me of harassment and intimidation, claimed I'd threatened her during the inspection, claimed she feared for her safety. She expected the system to believe her. She didn't expect evidence. The next morning, my attorney submitted recorded conversations, her voice clear as day, threatening to bury me in legal fees and make sure I never set foot here again. Emails followed. Orders to HOA security to monitor me. Instructions to Pressure County clerks. Financial transfers timed around zoning approvals. The story exploded. Local news vans arrived before noon. HOA president accused of land theft and fraud. Headlines spread faster than Linda could spin them. State investigators stepped in. They seized computers, froze HOA accounts, interviewed board members separately, and when the pressure mounted, the board collapsed. One member admitted they were told the land had been donated. Another said Linda handled all legal matters personally. A third confessed they'd never seen the original deeds. By the end of the week, the truth was undeniable. Linda hadn't just targeted my resort. She'd built a system: intimidation, false claims, legal confusion. She preyed on silence. When they finally came for her, there was no drama. No speech, no apology. She was escorted out of the HOA office in handcuffs past residents who once trusted her, now staring in disbelief. I watched from the lodge porch, not smiling, not angry, just steady, because the mountain doesn't rush justice, it waits. And when the truth finally reaches the surface, nothing can stop. After the sirens faded, and the investigators drove away, the mountain breathed again. It wasn't dramatic. No thunder, no applause. Just wind moving slowly through the pines, carrying away the noise that didn't belong there. For the first time since I returned, the silence felt earned and posed. The legal process unfolded with a precision that surprised everyone involved. Within weeks, the HOA was placed under court supervision. Accounts were frozen, records subpoenaed. A forensic audit exposed years of manipulation, fees inflated, funds redirected, contracts awarded to companies that existed only on paper. Linda Crowley's name surfaced everywhere, woven into every decision that mattered. She pleaded guilty, not because she felt remorse, but because the evidence was airtight. Fraud, forgery, coercion, abuse of authority. The judge didn't raise his voice when he sentenced her. He didn't need to. His words carried the weight of a system correcting itself. You used fear as a tool, he said, and called it governance. She was banned permanently from serving on any HOA or fiduciary board, ordered to repay every dollar taken, fined heavily, and placed under supervision that would follow her long after the case ended. When the ruling was read, I didn't feel triumph, I felt relief. The HOA dissolved soon after. Without its central figure and exposed for what it was, it collapsed under its own weight. Homeowners who had once argued with me now stood together demanding transparency, refunds, and accountability. Some came up to the resort quietly. An older woman brought a thermos of coffee. I should have asked questions sooner, she said. You weren't meant to, I replied. That was the point. One by one, the illegal structures came down. Platforms dismantled, stakes removed, gravel paths erased. The mountain slowly returned to itself, as if shrugging off something artificial. I helped where I could not out of obligation, but closure. Every board pulled, every sign removed. Felt like reclaiming a piece of time. But the hardest part wasn't taking back the land. It was deciding what to do with it. For years, I'd told myself I couldn't reopen the resort, that it belonged to a life that ended too suddenly. Every room carried a memory. Every window reflected something I'd lost. But standing there now watching the sunrise spill gold across the lodge roof, I understood something I'd avoided for years. Leaving didn't preserve the past. It froze it, so I stayed. I didn't reopen Silver Ridge as a business. I reopened it as a refuge. No advertising, no crowds, no noise. Just space. A place for people carrying weight, grief, exhaustion, silence they didn't know what to do with. Veterans, families, individuals who needed distance from a world that never stopped demanding. The old fireplace was restored. The guestbook returned to the front desk. I added one small plaque near the entrance. This land was never abandoned. It was waiting. Some evenings, I sit on the porch as the light fades and snow gathers on the trees. I think about power, how easily it corrupts when left unchecked, How fear makes people surrender things they shouldn't. I think about the mountain. It doesn't belong to me. Because of a deed that it belongs to me. Because I came back. The final court documents arrived late one afternoon. I placed them in the same folder as the original deed and locked them away. Not as trophies but as reminders. Justice isn't about revenge, it's about restoring balance. That night, I left the gate open for the first time in 7 years. I didn't feel the need to protect the land from anyone because some places don't need fences. They just need someone willing to stand when others try to take what was never theirs, and the mountain remembered.